In 1962, the United States detonated a nuclear bomb in space. The result? It scared the absolute life out of them. There was no mushroom cloud and no shockwave. Instead, a flash of white light turned the night sky into broad daylight. For 6 long minutes, the sky burned. 1,400 kilometers away in Hawaii, streetlights suddenly went out and sirens began to wail. Residents rushed into the streets, thinking the end of the world had arrived. But the most terrifying part wasn't the explosion itself. Scientists later discovered that this bomb created a man-made radiation belt around the Earth. It began cooking satellites in orbit one by one. This death zone remained in place for 5 whole years. Even crazier, the US military had no idea this would happen. All their instruments were instantly fried because the data exceeded their maximum measurable limits. They had triggered something so powerful they couldn't even measure it. So why did they put a nuke in space? How terrifying was this bomb? And if it happened today, what would happen to Earth? The story begins in 1957. That year, the Soviet Union launched a metal ball into the sky, Sputnik 1. The ball itself wasn't a weapon, but the message behind it kept the US military awake at night. If a rocket could put a satellite in orbit, it could deliver a nuclear warhead to Washington in just 30 minutes. Panicked, the Americans looked for a countermeasure. One plan sounded like science fiction, yet it was approved. Detonate a nuke in space. The idea was to use the resulting radiation field to destroy Soviet missiles mid-flight. This was Operation Fishbowl. To understand this crazy logic, you need to know one thing. Earth has an invisible suit of armor called the Van Allen radiation belt. This magnetic field traps high-energy particles, blocking harmful solar radiation and allowing life on Earth to survive. Scientists believed that if they detonated a nuke inside this field, the explosion would release high-energy electrons that the magnetic field would catch like a net. This would create a man-made radiation barrier. Since Soviet missiles had to travel through space before diving back down, this barrier would fry their electronic navigation systems, turning the warheads into useless scrap metal. The Pentagon said, "Do it." But the execution was one of the most chaotic operations in nuclear history. On the first attempt, the rocket vanished from radar right after launch. The commanders had to remotely self-destruct it, and the debris fell into the Pacific. On the second attempt, the engine failed after 59 seconds. The missile broke apart, scattering radioactive contaminants and turning Johnston Island into a nuclear contamination zone. Any normal organization would have stopped there, but the US military pushed forward with a third attempt. On July 9, 1962, a Thor rocket carrying a 1.4 megaton nuclear warhead, 500 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb, soared 400 kilometers high. This is roughly where the International Space Station orbits today. Then the nuke detonated. In the vacuum of space, it was silent. But what happened next stunned scientists on the ground. A massive aurora appeared over Hawaii, shifting from green to red to purple, covering the entire night sky. People as far as 10,000 kilometers away in New Zealand saw the strange light. At that same moment, 300 streetlights in Hawaii went out. Telephone lines went dead. Burglar alarms screamed. Some thought nuclear war had begun. Others thought it was an earthquake. Tourists in hotels rushed to rooftops to take photos. Meanwhile, every monitoring instrument hit its limit and failed, recording 0 useful data. The real trouble started after the explosion ended. Over the following months, satellites began to die. First was the UK's first satellite, Ariel 1, which went silent within weeks. Then Telstar 1, which had just performed the first transatlantic TV broadcast, died forever 7 months later. By the end of 1963, at least 6 satellites had failed, 1/3 of all satellites in orbit at the time. The cause was that man-made radiation belt. The US had placed a death collar around the Earth. High-energy electrons trapped by the magnetic field were slowly eroding every satellite that crossed that orbit. It took 5 years for that belt to finally dissipate. Glenn Seaborg, a Nobel Prize winner involved in the experiment, later wrote, "The results defied all our predictions." This experiment changed how humanity views space weapons. The explosion isn't the most dangerous part. In space, without air, there is no shockwave, so the direct physical damage is limited. The true horror is the aftermath, the electromagnetic impulse, and the radiation environment. These can silently destroy civilization's infrastructure before you even realize it's happening. The US military soon realized a chilling fact. If an enemy used this weapon, the consequences would be uncontrollable. A space nuke doesn't just hurt your opponent, it destroys the satellites of every nation, including your own. In 1963, the US, UK, and USSR signed a treaty banning nuclear tests in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater. In 1967, the Outer Space Treaty further banned deploying nukes in orbit. The drama ended there, but the story isn't over. Today, the situation is far more dangerous than in 1962. Back then, there were only 24 satellites in orbit. Today, there are more than 10,000. GPS, weather forecasts, bank transfers, cell signals, and the internet backbone, everything you rely on every day depends on satellites. And most of these satellites have no radiation shielding. They are completely exposed. If someone detonated a similar nuke in space today, an EMP would instantly cover half the planet. Satellites would die in clusters. Power grids, communication systems, and medical equipment on the ground could stop working without warning. The damaged satellites wouldn't just disappear, they would become high-speed debris, hitting other satellites and creating a chain reaction. This could turn low Earth orbit into an impassable graveyard of junk. The shadow cast by that silent fireball 60 years ago has still not faded away.